Yes.
So he, so a long time ago. Anyway, so
getting
he went
people.
to a football game, and he got on the aisle, and it was like, we're gonna miss a football game.
So she's calling us. Okay,
I was there.
Want to welcome all of you to our presentation, and I'm so happy to see you here. I know it's cold and yucky outside, and you came anyway, so that's wonderful. And we want you to support our wonderful presenter today, Joyce Mitchell. Pamela Cottam has agreed to give us an opening prayer, and then I will announce our program.
Dear Father in heaven, we are very grateful that we can meet as Relief Society sisters, and we are grateful for all the information that helps make our lives easier. We pray that Thou will assist us in all the affairs that regulate our families, and that we will do so with open heart and listen to Thy voice. And we ask that Thou will please bless our presenter tonight, and we give her our goodwill and good wishes in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. This is part, I feel, of a personal preparedness effort. Death is kind of uncharted territory for most of us because we haven't been there yet. Hello, come on in. But I just wanted to share with you, sometimes it will hit you unawares. I have a sister-in-law who 2 weeks ago woke up in the morning and her husband had died during the night. And so she woke up and he was deceased. And this was unexpected. And then also we had the little 6-year-old girl in Vineyard who was riding her scooter in her little cul-de-sac. And someone ran over her and killed her. So sometimes these things catch us unaware. I have personally dealt with several funerals. We had a baby that died, and we handled that funeral completely on our own with the help of Brother Davies, Dan Davies' father, who we had no money, and he gave us $100, and that's about how much it cost for us to take care of that funeral. And then my husband's mother passed away in our home about 5 years ago, and we did the funeral ourselves mostly, and she had everything that you usually get at a funeral: programs, music, flowers, casket, the whole thing. And we did it for like $3,000. At the same time, one of the members of our stake buried her father, and it cost her $15,000 for the same things. Can I mention your little $2 million?
Yeah.
She was telling me just a few minutes ago that if everyone in the stake knew of what their options were and how they could save, it would save just in our stake about $2 million.
That's minimum.
Minimum. So you need to know what your options are, and so that's what Joyce is here to present to us, and we really appreciate her coming. She's very busy. She's very knowledgeable, and she'll have a question and answer. So I'll turn the time over to Joyce.
Thank you. All right. Yay. And just so you know a little bit more about who I am before we start, I made notes about myself. Believe me, there'll be a lot of repeating if I don't read something. I'm the president of the Utah affiliate of the nonprofit Funeral Consumers Alliance, the oldest and largest funeral consumer advocacy organization in the U.S. For nearly 2 decades, I've studied and taught fellow Utah citizens what they need to know to maintain their liberty, to carry out simple, frugal, and meaningful funerals. I've been married to David Mitchell, back there, the very back, for 33 years. We have 4 children that grew up reviewing their funeral plans every couple years. And we have 3 grand boys and 2 granddaughters. And so that's our family. All right. Now I've prepared 1 hour of presentation, of which I've planned 10 minutes for laughter and applause. So that's on you. Okay, now first, all the instruction and how-to that I share is on my website, utahfunerals.org. I am the president, like I said before, and it's an affiliate of the national organization. All right. Oh yeah, I haven't got there yet. All right. I just want to say one more thing. I hope that you take what you like from tonight's presentation and leave the rest, okay? So if you feel like, oh man, she's trying to make me do a home funeral or something, that's not the intention. The intention is really that you give your full informed consent when you do go to buy a funeral, instead of just whatever they're selling. And also so that you can be a superior help to anyone else in need. Okay, here we go. In 2010, I was in a political chat room having a conversation with a fellow campaigner. He found out that I was a funeral consumer advocate, and he asked me this question. This is his exact wording. How would one go about not embalming a corpse? Where can one go to select inexpensive caskets? And is there a listing of the older rural cemeteries that would accept non-vault burials? Sorry, I didn't keep this political. I was just asking so that I can make a more informed decision when the time comes to bury a person I know, namely me. How many of you have wanted similar or knew someone who did? By a raise of hands. Okay, about 75% of you. 3 days later, this man died unexpectedly in his 50s of a massive heart attack. I asked people in the chat room to let his family know what they witnessed him discuss with me. It was probably already too late though. As many of you may know, police and hospitals always insist that you call a funeral home immediately. And they don't inform you that you have other options, like to act as your own dispositioner, which is what they call it when you're your own funeral director. But let's see, so I never did hear back if anyone contacted his family or not. Fast forward 9 years to just last month. I decided to check out his obituary to see if I could find clues to what kind of funeral he actually got. It's then that I saw that he died on the exact day that I was considering his story for this presentation. I said to my husband, I have got to call his wife. I found her number and we got to talk. She said no one ever told her. Her children determined the funeral purchases with her, and they were typical selections. She also told me that 2 days, so I talked to him 3 days before he died. 2 days before he died, he told her, I've forgiven everyone I've ever felt wronged by. The next day he told her, you've been a good wife to me. He went to a dinner party with friends that night, had a fabulous time. She revealed the time he died early the next morning. It was the very hour I had been writing about his story, preparing for this presentation. Is this a coincidence or a message to us? He heeded a curiosity about his own mortality. He forgave all. He expressed gratitude to his eternal companion. He enjoyed time with friends. My witness was added to her witness that he had been guided by the Spirit and was being prepared. Since preparing for my own death, I've seen it help me in 1, my own spiritual preparedness, and 2, in making the most of every day. Who knew funeral planning could do that? It does. I've seen it so many times. One way we can make our acknowledgement of our own mortality real is to write it. This funeral planning form is from the utahfunerals.org website. That's my website. And there are other funeral planning forms out there, but mine is funner, I think. Then share it with your next of kin. And then, if needed, assign someone to control the disposition of your remains. What do I mean by assign someone? An agent. Assign an agent. Right here. This is who inherits the right and duty to control the disposition of your remains. Find your person or persons. Have you found them? Okay. will they agree with one another? Who here has multiple, like on the line where majority of your children or a majority of your siblings? Now, will they agree with each other? Maybe not. Or, okay, so then in that case, you would go to my website and assign someone to control the disposition of your remains. I just made up this form using what the law says, Utah law says, and I just made a form. But you could write one up yourself if you wanted to. Okay, so who here thinks their person or persons wouldn't want to or be able to carry out your disposition? Which means pay for the funeral or organize it, make the decisions. Okay, then you would do this, assign an agent. We're right back there again. And so that's so easy. Tomorrow you can get your plan notarized for free at any bank. And while you're there, why not set up a pay upon death account and start using it as your backup savings? A pay on death account is one way to keep some cash out of the probate system, to be used after you die by a person you assign. Does anyone need me to clarify probate? Okay.
Yeah, if you would, please.
When the government captures all your assets and money and nobody can have access to it until they've gone through a process of finding out who your creditors were and if they've all been paid, and
So
then
it could be in limbo for
a year.
a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And don't they charge you to do that? Do they take
I
some
don't
of the
know.
money?
That's an interesting question.
The answer is, you have to have an attorney, usually have to have an attorney
Okay.
to handle the probate,
There
which
you
makes
go.
it expensive and time consuming.
But if you have a kind of a will or, you know,
Trust.
a trust or a living will.
Yes, that's the better way to go, to put your assets into a trust. So I'm gonna tell a story now, a true story.
Make sure it's a revocable trust though,
Okay,
because if it isn't, and it's a non-revocable, you can't go back and make changes in that trust.
hey honey, we'll have to check and see if ours is revocable or not. I have a true story of what happened to one family that didn't do any of the things I've showed you so far. I was new in a neighborhood, so I only met this man when I asked to add my broken vacuum to a dumpster that had been sitting in front of his house for some weeks. He told me that he just spent $8,000 for a funeral for his mother just weeks earlier. He added that the bishop helped him out by authorizing $2,000 of fast offering funds to help cover the funeral expenses. Prior to her death, he'd been serving as an unpaid full-time caregiver. All his mother's assets were now tied up in probate because she had no will and had put none of her assets into a trust, which would have put them into the hands of a responsible party immediately. Instead, he had to commit $1,000, he told me, right away to retain a lawyer to help him with the probate process. So he bought the funeral on credit, planning to pay for it later from the sale of her home, which was double mortgaged. Yeah. He was forced to hustle to prepare it for sale and to move out within weeks of our conversation. This caring mother had expressed interest in setting her affairs in order, he told me, but died before she followed through. She had planned, actually a couple weeks before she was going to. Now, there was no way I was going to tell him I was a funeral consumer advocate. He's just telling me I'm a lady with a broken vacuum, you know. But I did tell the bishop and Relief Society president, who had so caringly tried to help this man. Imagine if they had known it was a possibility for him to have chosen a more affordable mortuary just by comparison price shopping on my website. He could have easily saved $3,000 or more to help him get back on his feet. Now, the following is a story where things went right, despite a family being unprepared for sudden, unexpected death. How? I was able to help them because I learned the things I'm sharing with you tonight. Okay, this is Cindy. One August day in 2012, I got a call from a neighbor that my friend Cindy, age 53, was just found dead in her home and that her husband, Hatem, was very distraught. My husband Dave and I, her home teachers, rushed out over to their apartment. The police, seeing that we were Hatem's only people, let us sit with him outside his front door. Hatem told us that upon coming home from his daily walk, he found Cindy face down on the couch. He couldn't rouse her, so he dialed 911. I met Cindy just before she joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints less than 3 years earlier. Hatem, a faithful Muslim, born and raised in Jerusalem, was supportive of her choice. He only wanted her to believe in God. So when she joined our church, he was relieved that she had finally made a commitment to follow God. Now that she was dead, this choice would prove to be even more of a comfort to him. The medical examiner came while we were there and declared it a natural death, a heart attack, and that no autopsy would be performed. An advocate with the city gave us this booklet and asked us to call a funeral home, so I asked Hatem, would you feel comfortable having Cindy's body stay in your home until the funeral? Asking such a question is commonplace for me. At that point, I'd been a funeral consumer advocate, keeping a website and answering questions by phone for the past 12 years. One reason people choose a family-directed funeral, as we call it, is the cost. Then there are the more personal reasons, illustrated here. A son caring for his mother at home before she died. Then preparing her body in the home after she died. Carrying her as a family. Those who knew her best, making her look just so. Look more closely a moment at the things family or friends can do for themselves. Hatem and Cindy didn't have savings, so a family-directed funeral would be his chance to provide his wife with not just an affordable funeral, but a truly personal one. When the police and advocate heard me say, bypass the funeral home, they paused and huddled. This option was not listed in the booklet they handed us of instructions to help families cope with unexpected death. They came back and insisted we call a funeral home immediately, and that they would not leave until a mortuary picked up the body. I told them that it's the law that family can care for their own dead, but that fell on deaf ears. Then Hatem admitted to me that he didn't want Cindy's body to stay in their apartment. This was understandable, since it is the first time he heard of such a thing. So I looked at the city's mortuary list, and I knew which one was the least expensive. It was not on the list. The mortuary I was thinking of would be flexible about doing the paperwork and body storage in our behalf and let us do the rest ourselves. What I mean by flexible is they don't manipulate you with exorbitant charges when you want minimum services. So I looked up the number for my favorite funeral home, called and put the funeral director on speakerphone so everyone could hear that they were coming, and the police would hopefully leave. So I looked up the number for, oh no, I thought I just said that. After the call, I could see Hatem in his home, sobbing and pacing, so I began to step into the apartment. Cindy's body was lying on the floor in the front room. The officer came up behind me and said sternly, "Can I ask you to step out?" He then walked into the apartment and turned away from me. I asked, "Did you want to speak to me?" He said, "No, I want to speak to him." Then Hatem asked in his strong Middle Eastern accent, "What do you want?" The officer said, "Nothing, I just want her out." I said, "What? What do you think I'm gonna do?" He didn't answer but tried to stare me down. Hatem then said to the officer, "I want you out. She is with me." I probably make him sound more angry than he was. Sad. Hatem and I tried to negotiate with the officers to at least wait down by the sidewalk. One officer kept giving us a hard time while his partner, I guess the good cop, stayed silent. Hatem became even more frustrated. "You listen to this lady. She is representing me." I couldn't believe they were acting this way in the presence of a man who just lost the most important person in his world. It wasn't until the next day that I thought of a way that I could have satisfied the officers' fears more quickly by simply telling them that they could check out what I was saying at vitalrecords.utah.gov, where the first sentence under how to file a death record reads, "Utah law allows families," there it is, "to care for their dead without the services of a licensed funeral director." I also could have illustrated by telling them about a Provo woman who cared for her dead without a funeral director. She hosted a 2-day open house viewing for her husband in her home and had a lovely chapel service. And coordinated burial directly with Camp Williams Veterans Cemetery, all without a funeral director. Since the military knew she would have to apply through the post office for an American flag to lay on the casket, they showed their support by sending a soldier to the door of her home to deliver her a flag in person. After another 10 minutes or so, the officers suddenly left without saying a thing. Rude. Later, the funeral home worker arrived to pick up the body. Hatem, a neighbor, my husband and I lifted Cindy's body onto the gurney. We covered her and buckled the straps. The men carried the gurney out the door, down the steps, and into the mortuary van. The next day, I explained Hatem's financial situation to the funeral director over the phone. He then pressed for us to encourage cremation since it was obvious to him that the money was going to come from donations. Now, I'm the first to recommend cremation because it can help people to spend many times less than a typical whole body burial. But I respect people's wishes more, and Hatem's one request, actually plea, was that the body not be desecrated in any way, and to him, that meant cremation or embalming. He didn't want Cindy's body burned or cut. He repeated that several times, begging us to protect her body from cremation or invasion. I was sure he would have nightmares for 10 years if we didn't get Cindy a whole body burial. Cindy had never had children, so I called Cindy's mother and siblings to help, to pay for services. No one could afford to. So I calculated that in a historic pioneer cemetery 1 hour away would cost $1,500 less than our local city cemetery. I also knew that the funeral home was charging us less than $400 for their services. So I figured everything would come to slightly over $1,000. The bishop, of course you would know, our neighborhood congregation leader, was surprised. Actually, he was shocked. He said, "If you can do it for that much, then the Ward Fast Offering funds can pay for it." I reassured the bishop we could. So he turned to Hatem and said, "We will cover the cost of Cindy's burial. The fast offerings will pay for it." Hatem cried and kissed the bishop and declared his undying love for the LDS people. So it was set. Now we had money, and with Hatem's permission, I was in charge. We even had it lined up with Cindy's brother-in-law to drive the casket in his truck and to bring pallbearers. The next day, Hatem called in the morning. He said, crying, "I want to see Cindy." Usually a private viewing or ID viewing would cost at least $100. I called the funeral director, and he did us a favor and said Hatem could come view Cindy when I delivered the casket. This was a casket I had made myself. I have made several caskets over the years. I used to keep them in my home to supply families who were in immediate need at just my cost. But now there is at least one builder in Utah County and one near Ogden who make them for great prices. What compelled me to do this? In 1994, I read an article about a man in New Hampshire who made a plain pine casket for his dad. A quote from one funeral director in the article is what shocked me. He said, "A lot of people say they want to be buried in a pine box, but when it comes time, they end up with the standard commercial casket." I thought, how come consumers can't get what they want? I'd heard many people say, "Just stick me in the ground in a plain pine box." How many of you have heard similar? Okay, like 25%. How often do we see a burial in a simple wood box? Hand high. All right, 2. Oh, 3. 1 was my husband. That's a... So I hunted online and found the Funeral Consumers Alliance. I joined right away. Over the next 6 years, I continued to see too many articles in my local newspaper about families buying funerals that they couldn't afford. I said to myself, don't they know funerals don't have to cost so much? So in 2000, I, with the help of others, started the Utah affiliate of the Funeral Consumers Alliance. Hatem and I delivered the casket. Cindy's body had been wheeled out of refrigeration into a quiet little viewing room. The plastic sheeting that surrounded her was folded back from her head and shoulders and a blanket placed over the plastic. When a family takes care of their dead themselves, they don't wrap the body in plastic, but they keep it cold using dry ice often. Like we have done taking care of her at home, the funeral director set her facial muscles before refrigeration. There was no smell. She looked relaxed and natural. On the way home, Hatem said he liked the casket inside the Subaru and preferred it over the open air of a truck. This is common that people have these feelings about the respectability of one vehicle over another. These mourners crossed several state lines with their loved one's body in the back. Oh wait, I didn't show you yet. There we are. No embalming required. A neighbor who did the same told me that when transporting her father's body to California, her brother's car was one of the random vehicles pulled over at the state line into California. The casket in plain sight. He was only asked if they had any produce with them and waved right on through. When people learn of these options and others, such as renting a nice SUV for a few hours, they appreciate the opportunity to care for their loved one in such a personal yet affordable manner. On Saturday morning, when we arrived at the mortuary, the casket was ready for us. It was nailed closed, and tapestry we had selected was laid over the top. The mortician placed a thick cardboard tube inside the back of the Subaru, so whenever I see a thick cardboard tube, I save them now. You should too. In the back of the Subaru, so when the casket rested on it, it rolled right in with ease, no struggle. We tied the back of the hatch to stay down because it didn't quite fit. And we were on our way in 15 minutes. After he did have to hand us the death certificate and the burial transit permit, but that was it. We arrived at the all-volunteer run.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Burial transit permit, is that, did you get that from the city or the state or?
It's issued by the state medical examiner's office. In this case, the funeral director got it for us because he can do everything electronic. You and I have to go down to the health department, vital records office of the county where the death occurred.
Yeah, the funeral director did that for us too. We had to take the body to New Mexico, and he had all the paperwork for us.
So
Yeah.
in order to cross the state line, you have to have that piece of paper?
Yeah.
If you get stopped and they know what's there.
Even if you hire a funeral director to take the body, he's gonna have to get that permit. It does 4 things. You can do burial at sea, burial out of state, cremation, or act as your own dispositioner. But it's exorbitant, $207 because of our legislature last year wanting to use us to fund the medical examiner's office. So, yeah, we're all mad about that.
So you can go to the office in American Fork for approval?
It has to be the county where the death occurs. Yeah, so yeah, I guess there is an American Fork Health Department, so if they have a vital records office, you're good. Yep.
Okay.
And all the instructions are on the website, even a flow chart, even step-by-step instructions.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
Exposition, or what was that last?
Dispositioner.
Oh, dispositioner.
That's what they call you, any of us. If we act as our own funeral director, they call us a dispositioner.
And is that what you were saying was really expensive, or was there something else?
Just the permit.
The permit, got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we arrived at the all-volunteer run cemetery. The sexton had notified me the day before that the grave was already dug, and sure enough, there was one giant mound of dirt in the whole cemetery, so we knew right where to go. Instead of a mechanical lowering device provided by a vault company, the grave was prepared with 4 hollow, square aluminum beams crossing it. Pleasant Green Cemetery began accepting burial without vaults in the summer of 2012. But long ago, there were many burials without vaults in this pioneer cemetery. Now, more than half of their burials are again free of these barriers. We hope that other cemeteries will re-embrace this environmentally friendly and decomposition-friendly practice. Our group of family, friends, and neighbors gathered around the casket, hoisted above its final resting place. We could have just as easily held a meeting at the chapel, but Cindy never liked a big to-do. Her mother told us that even as a kid, she never wanted a big birthday party. She always preferred one friend coming over for her parties. A short graveside service was conducted, then anyone was invited who wanted to express any final thoughts or goodbyes. Cindy's husband spoke to the group and testified that he'd done his very best to fulfill Cindy's wishes for her burial. According to his faith, this is a very important responsibility associated with many blessings for those who care for their dead properly. When the sexton knew we were ready, he came over and unraveled the rope, which was cut into 4 lengths. Each length of rope was sent through the handles of the casket. Several men hoisted the casket as others pulled out the last 2 beams that it rested on. Then, the casket was lowered gently and evenly to the bottom. Then the sexton offered to anyone who desired the opportunity to add a shovel of dirt into the grave. Hatem took him up on the offer. As he shoveled, he seemed to plan on filling the grave himself. I shoveled a few scoops, as did a few others, but Hatem only stopped when he ran out of energy. He then said with earnest in his voice, "I'm at peace now. She is at rest. I did what she asked. She's in God's hands now." As we left, we spoke of all that was said and done. When we were a distance away, we could look back and see the backhoe finish filling the grave. It was a privilege to be here and a good resting place for my friend. The cemetery rules are very flexible for memorializing graves, so each is different throughout the cemetery. Hatem returned and placed this granite headstone that we ordered online. He also designed and soon after placed more finishings for her grave. Hatem said, "I am going to talk to the people at the mosque about setting aside a room for families to care for their dead," and he did. So. Oh yeah, and there's a view of isn't that a beautiful view?
Where is that?
In Pleasant Green, it used to be, it's now called Magna. Thank you for asking. Now it's Magna. Okay. Okay, I'm long past that spot. I'm lost. There we are. Okay. It's impervious to fire, theft, earthquakes, rain, and all manner of creatures. The casket? No, your prepaid funeral contract. Don't you know? Most people think that setting up a prepaid funeral contract is the right thing to do. Then everything will go smooth and you can lock in the price. You'll be locked in all right, and you'll tell your family that everything is taken care of, and they won't know what you're talking about. Here's a list of reasons to avoid one of those contracts. We're going to go through each of these in minute detail for the rest of our time. Not just kidding. How do you feel now that you just faced the death of this presentation and it didn't happen? Does someone want to read the 6 reasons not to buy one of these prepaid things? Go ahead.
The mortuary may go out of business. You might move. You may later decide you want more simplicity at a lower cost. You can't afford the payments anymore. Contract breakage through miscommunication and misunderstandings. 25 other situations that add cost after you die.
Excellent.
And I found that out every time we go to the mortuary where my son is buried, my mother's gonna be buried there. She's done this prepaid thing, and they couldn't find her stuff. And I says, come on, you guys, seriously? My son's been gone for this many years and you can't find it, you better get looking. And they finally found it, and they finally sent me an email with all the information. All we have to do is closing and opening costs of the ground, and we're good. But then there's those other little hidden fees, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Wow, great testimonial. Thank you. And we don't even know each other, right?
Yeah, no.
That's awesome.
What'd you say your name was?
I need you to come to my next presentation. Yes.
Just in case you're interested, you can rent that gurney on wheels to put the casket on so that you can, if you have to take it any distance, it might be difficult to carry. So you can rent that, you give them a deposit, and then they give you your money back.
And we'll have a picture of one of those later so
Yeah.
that they can see it.
But that's
Good.
a big help.
Now, there are 2 reasons to buy a pre-need contract: to get rid of money or spend down in order to qualify for Medicaid. And you know, the pay on death account that I mentioned earlier, you can't use that. You can't use that if you're going to try to qualify for Medicaid. And also, if there's no one to carry out your after-death care. Now, I just want to say something about this spend down to qualify for Medicaid. Since wedding receptions are much like funerals, okay? The spend down incentive might be like the government saying, we'll let you pay ahead for an expensive wedding reception, so you're poor enough for the taxpayers to fund your medical care. Doesn't that sound like government colluding with wedding planners? Why not pay for a year of grandkids' college tuition and assign someone else to handle your after-death care on the cheap? How's that for smart crony capitalism? Notice I didn't say, have the grandkid who's going to college carry out, you'll get nothing done. Okay. When you plan with these free forms from my website and communicate them to your next of kin, you are sending a final personal message to your loved ones. You don't look like you're telling someone else they're gonna die when you ask them to make their funeral plans. I mean, unless you're on your last leg, then you totally look like you're trying to take them down with you. And you are better prepared to carry out for others that most tender responsibility. Such was the case with my sister. This was her experience that I share with her permission and the family's permission. She wrote this story. I heard that a couple in my ward had suddenly lost their 9-month-old girl, their only child. I decided to immediately phone and extend my condolences. I asked the mother if there was anything I could do for her. She said, "Come immediately." Although it was a bit awkward because I frankly barely knew them, I had asked, and she told me she needed me to come. Oh, the pain and grief was the worst I've ever seen. I really wanted to distance myself, not knowing how I could ever help these poor people. I then took the responsibility for a few tasks that needed to happen at their house, and I thought I'd be done. 2 days after my initial visit, I received a call early in the morning from a fellow ward member saying that this couple had randomly wandered to her door. And could I come to talk to them? As they expressed their distressed feelings, the realization of what needed to happen surfaced quickly. They needed the baby to come home. I have always been very traditional, safe, and practical, but the conversation quickly turned to the makings of a home funeral. I thought to myself, there has to be some granola-eating friend or family member that can help them make this happen. But I gathered some information about the legality, and things just started happening. I helped the parents bring their baby home, and for several days, many people did come to their home to share in their grief. Even the people who said they would only come to the door were literally drawn in. The feelings of love in the home were overwhelming. The first sparks of recovery came over the mother's face. However, the father remained inconsolable. I, with 2 sisters from the ward, took care of the baby's body and dressed and redressed it, as the mother said she just wanted to see her in a particular outfit one last time. This was difficult. I was not a medical person, and the baby had been examined to determine the cause of death and was frankly not in great shape. But each day, after keeping her cool at my home in the night, I brought the baby to theirs. One ward member called a carpenter friend who felt honored to make a simple casket for the baby that we lined with pretty pink silky fabric and lace. Finally, the 6th day after the baby died, we wrapped her body for the last time, dressed her in her white blessing dress, and brought her to the chapel for the funeral. After the funeral, we transported the baby to the cemetery where the parents' extreme grief reappeared. We watched as the mother opened the casket and placed into it many mementos. Finally, the time came when the casket was reluctantly closed for the last time and lowered into the grave. While driving home, I heard the song Amazing Grace over the radio. It's then that I clearly saw that God had chosen me, that I mattered to him, that he was watching me and loves me. Caring for this family in this way is an experience that I will cherish forever. I still share a very special bond with them and the 2 Relief Society sisters intimately involved. And that's me with my sister and the mother that lost that baby. Follow-up. Ruby told me she wanted to tell the rest of the story. Her heart had been closed to more children when she had her first because it was a difficult pregnancy and birth, and the child was so perfect. After the loss of her little Sarah Nicole, she and her husband decided to be open to as many children as the Lord allowed, and here is their family today. President Monson included death as a major subject in many conference talks. On top of that, home funerals, homemade caskets, and simple burial were subjects within his talks in Fall Conference 01 and Spring 02, 05, 08, and 09. How about that? And I have the clips, so if anyone wants to examine them, I can prove it. I appreciate this great prophet reminding us that under the liberty of God, Latter-day Saints have options. The traditional funeral package is called traditional because they are the services most people buy today. 100 years ago, our great-grandparents didn't care for their dead the way we do. Neither do they in most countries. With that said, you are not under any obligation of tradition to buy a package. And is often not really a deal anyways. You'll save to itemize. Since you might be under some pressure to buy more than you want, I will sing a song. I'm excited. Okay, I don't think I need the microphone. So my loved one passed away and left me to find a way to do a funeral and to put him in the ground. Everyone said, don't you worry, but there is a great big hurry. We wouldn't want a smelly body round. Buy, 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 and keep on buying. There's nothing better you can do. Your loved one won't feel all your love in the heavens up above if you're cheap about the funeral that you do. So that day I met the man who'd my best interest in his hand. He showed me all the papers I must sign. He told me not to cremate for a symbol of hell that would make. But embalming nearly brings him back alive. Buy, 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 I keep on buying. There's nothing better you can do. Will my neighbor know I love my loved one up above if I'm cheap about the funeral that I do? Well, it all turned out okay, because I called my FCA. That's the Funeral Consumers Alliance. It's a nonprofit. They told me all that they knew I could do. Got the pine box they'd always wanted. No embalming, so he looked at. And I got it all without being rude. Make plans now, it is surprising what your love can really do. Remember, it's about the living, and you're showing love by giving a funeral that's meaningful to you. A funeral that's meaningful to you. Thank you. I was hoping you would applaud because I planned on a whole 10 minutes of laughter and applause. All right. So I have an Amish friend who is a funeral consumer advocate in this same organization. He's also a lawyer and runs a natural burial cemetery in Pennsylvania. He told me of an experience he witnessed that broke the Amish tradition of men digging the graves. He said a group of Amish women decided they wanted to dig the grave for their friend who had died of cancer. She was only 100 pounds at that point, but so was every cubic foot of the wet clay soil they were digging. So they meticulously carved the ground to only remove what dirt was necessary. They dug down 3 feet, made it wider at the shoulders, narrow at the feet. He told me it looked like a perfect casket. They laid her cloth-shrouded body on a board, otherwise known as a bier. And here's a couple pictures of biers. You recognize that one. And here's another. More. The Amish women lowered the bier down with ropes. After filling the grave, the body had 2 foot of soil over it. This is all that's necessary. It was perfectly minimal. Last year, my father-in-law died in rural upstate New York. Everyone in the family wanted me to take care of arranging the funeral, both funerals, the one in New York and here, in their behalf. The first thing I did, because New York requires a mortuary, only about 7 states do, I got a price list emailed to me from the funeral home that they were interested in getting. One of their sons went to school, high school with the man who owned this mortuary. So one should always obtain one of these first, even if there's an at-a-glance survey provided by your local consumer alliance. The prices were fair, so I told the funeral director our selections over the phone. He emailed me an itemization and total for what I chose. We approved it together, and Mom went and paid. Now, this concerted effort worked out in our case because I've learned the things I'm teaching you tonight. But here's a true life phone call, Reader's Theater, I received one day. Earl, Shirley, come on up. Okay, Shirley is our consumer, and Earl is the volunteer consumer advocate. You say ring. Oh, let's see the consumer's calling. Yeah. Ring, ring.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You switched.
No, I switched it long ago. He's been practicing his lines. He is such a good student.
Okay. I'm not colorblind.
Good thing.
And put that right up to your mouth because they need to hear every word.
Ring, ring.
Hello, this is Earl.
Hi, is this Funeral Consumers Alliance?
Yes, how can I help you?
I bought a funeral for my husband that I can't afford because a helpful relative said he would pay for everything, but now he refuses to pay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. This is very common, unfortunately. Did the mortuary show you prices as you went along during the purchase process?
Well, some, but I was afraid to say anything. I believe the helpful relative thought he would get a good deal since the funeral director is his cousin. I didn't know what agreement they had, so I was hesitant to be picky, but I'm now willing to pay half if he would just follow through.
That brings me to 2 questions I'd like to ask you. According to the Utah Funeral Licensing Act, the funeral home is obliged to hand the consumer a general price list as soon as discussions of selections begin. And it must be a copy that you can keep and take home with you. So, did you have a copy of that? Did the funeral home give you both of you a price list to look over during the arrangements conference?
No, No, I only saw an occasional price as pages of caskets were flipped and pictures of flower arrangements appeared.
Not good. One more question. The FTC funeral rule tells funeral directors that they must give each consumer a complete itemization of all funeral goods and services selected with a final total at the end of the arrangement discussion. Did you both receive this final statement at the end of making your decisions, or did you not?
No, my relative received it in the mail and then asked the mortuary to send it to me instead. That's when I found out how much everything cost and that he expected me to pay. I would have made more modest selections had I not felt pressured to please my relative and his funeral director cousin.
To me, it sounds like your relative was shocked by the prices too. I recommend talking to the funeral director about what the law says he should have done with disclosures and see if he will reduce the price. Don't be afraid to go and ask these questions.
Excellent. Hey, let's give them a good round of applause. Do you want to hear what happened to this lady?
Yeah.
The above scenario ended well because I knew the things I'm teaching you today. The caller approached the mortuary using the references to the law. They in turn halved the price, and the helpful relative agreed to pay half of the new price. So a happy ending. And this is a quote from a general price list where they actually wrote this on there because this happens so often. I'll just let you read it at a glance. But it must be extremely common for them to publish this on their price list that they want you to pay ahead because you're going to have trouble with that exact scenario of agreeing to pay together. Okay, so what time is it? I don't want to go over. Oh, so time flies when you're having fun. Okay, the most important thing. I got to get to this. That's my husband driving the body home from the airport. We picked him up at Delta Cargo, and there's the let's see, there's the casket in the Relief Society room on a table. And we put a table in front of the pulpit, in the front of the chapel. So we didn't move the table, The pallbearers picked up the casket and brought it there. The only thing that was tricky was learning how to go through a door. It only took a few minutes for them to figure it out, and they were awesome. But the casket truck is what funeral directors will use and take the job away from the pallbearers, right? You see them go slowly down the aisle. Okay. And I maybe should skip this. I gotta skip this. It's a great story, and they tried to charge them for minimal services. Okay. Oh, great, I get to sing again. Okay. Morticians come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when asked how about something for me, they may answer with voices so sweet. You may stand here, not there. You will move to the chapel on cue. Sit and pray, but first pay. You chip in, that's all you need do. The mortician is skilled, don't you think? But I sense I do smell a slight stink. We know the embalming's the pest that has made them upsell all the rest. You can stand, you may stand here or there. No, wait. You can move to the chapel on cue. Sit and pray, but first pay. You chip in, that's all you need do. Did you know you can care for your dead? Make a plain pine box instead. Keep the contents cold using ice, and the meeting you hold will be nice. You can stand here or there. Your program reminds you what to do. It's okay to have your way in expressing your final adieu. And a designated would fight. They're assigned to do what you like. You make them an agent for you, and no family feuds would ensue. You can stand here or there. The program reminds you what to do. It's okay to have your way and expressing your final adieu. Now, each one of you can be an expert to your family and neighbors, and it's such a joy to do that. It really is. So, because you've been such a great audience, and I want to just lock in some key principles that we've learned tonight, I'm going to sing you one last song. That's really why I'm here. No, it's not easy to get an audience.
Are we going to have a chance to get some?
Question and answer?
Yes, right after this song.
Okay.
Yep, and I have one last slide and one last joke, and then you get your question and answer. Okay. Oh, wait, I got to plug in. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. We have to go back to the beginning, and I have to turn on the... See, I was a singing time leader. I know how to do all of this. Oh, wait, I left. This is all we're getting, because I left. Oh, no, it worked. I know it ain't the same as the old days. Licensed providers make the world insane. So if love and peace is so strong, why is money changing where it don't belong? Chemical mixes pumped into loved ones, limousines, adding burdens in the long run. So I ask myself, where's the pressure really from? And I ask myself, really, what is going on in this world that we're living in? People keep on giving and making fast decisions to escape humiliation, fake helping each other, denying thy brother. Here's what's going on, and the reason I won't hide. Professional display serves to feed into pride. When I care for my dead, then I feel good inside. There's the love, y'all. She is the truth, y'all. Now I know. It was supposed to be much louder. People dying. I'm not going to sing the chorus. This is my daughter-in-law. Expressing their love, expressing their love, expressing their love, their love, their love. You feel the weight of a body on your shoulder, but as you get older, you got to get bolder. Most of us only know about getting rid of it. Hurriedness got us going in a wrong direction. Bad information told by mortuaries, profiteering images, causing horror stories, bankrupting families, buying so much service, cookie cutter funerals sold on purpose. Yo, whatever happened to the value of community? Whatever happened to the beauty of home funerary? Instead of spreading love, we're spreading commerciality. Lack of knowledge leading choice away from unity. That's the reason why I'm daily showing how to. We got to share the good news all across the town. Every cheap funeral spreads the word about funeral liberty. Till love is found. People dying, families hurt, you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach? Do a funeral that's cheap. Funeral Consumers Alliance helps you, gives you guidance what to do. Cause people wanna have an experience doing it too. There is the love, sharing the love. All right. The love. Thank you for bearing with me on that. Okay. I left my speaker on all night, and that's how that happens. Okay. Wait a minute, where's that last slide? Hey. Oh, I know, I decided not to do that. There we are. All right. At the end of my father-in-law's graveside service, I had a little brain freeze. It was a huge snowstorm out. I went to the front of the gathering, and turning to everyone, I said, well, that's it. We all had a good laugh about that later. What I actually should have done was I should have said, thank you all for coming. This concludes our services. Now for some questions and answers. No, you wouldn't say that Q&A thing at the graveside service. But it's really questions and answers now. We're done.
So, in your presentation,
Yeah.
I got the message that you don't have to be embalmed. It could go up to, is there a certain time frame? Because I was under the impression that if you died and didn't want to be embalmed, you had to be buried within 24 hours.
Yes, that is tricky wording that a lot of mortuaries struggle with. That it's not the truth. You can refrigerate as well. That's another option, and you do that using dry ice or Techna ice, refreezable ice packs. Either way, you can do that.
We're in a funeral home.
In a funeral home, they have a walk-in fridge.
Yeah.
I understood it was 3 days that they had before they had to be buried.
No, you can take as long as you like. In fact, I got to talk to the director of the body donor program at the U of U. That if somebody doesn't have any money, they can totally donate their body to medical science or education, and they take them at the U of U. And he said to me, I asked him. Actually, I have the exact quote too. It was so good. I'm just gonna tell you exactly what he said. He said, I asked him, what is the one thing you wish people knew about donating their body to science and education? And he told me that he wishes more families knew they could do a funeral before the body is picked up. He added that if embalming is procured, the funeral home must simply not embalm the cavity organs. So I asked him, what if a family's doing a do-it-yourself funeral without embalming? And he replied, this is a quote, they have about a week as long as the body is kept cold. And that's to have the body still be usable for science and education.
So do you have a thermometer that keeps it at a certain temperature then?
We did that with my father-in-law. We had a thermometer in the garage, and it happened to be February, and the garage stayed 40 degrees the whole time, and that was the perfect temperature for body storage. We were prepared to turn on a little lamp to keep it warmer in the van, but didn't need it.
So you don't want to go colder?
You don't want to freeze the body. It would make it become a little more liquidy.
So,
I don't want to discourage you.
is there a website that we can go to see what the law specifically says about burial and who can do it?
Yeah, you can look up the law yourself by saying Utah law, any question you have really, or you can go to my website and I list everything I could do there. I mean, I'm a mom, I've been doing this for a long time. I push everything onto those sites so that I didn't have to get as many phone calls as I could handle. And so it's all there.
So is that your website on the bottom of this?
UtahFunerals.org. Mm-hmm.
So then you'd have to call that specific cemetery, if you have plots there, to see what the requirements are as far as a vault.
Yes, cemeteries are unregulated in the state of Utah. They don't have a licensure thing over them, and so they can set whatever rules they want. And so you can negotiate with the cemetery, keep your contract if you make a contract with the cemetery. The latest thing that's been going on is that city councils will exponentially raise the opening and closing fee for plots that you've bought ahead, thinking, oh, it's a great deal. Let's buy one for everybody in the family. If that family member's an out-of-towner, when they go to get buried there, they'll be paying multiple times more than the plot is worth now. And city councils do that. Yeah.
My son builds caskets. She walks in their arms every time she comes to work, and it's ready to go.
No kidding. That's cool.
Oh, at the back.
They're stored at the office.
The back, what? Who is the one who builds the caskets?
Yeah, tell us.
Who builds the caskets?
Who builds them?
Which
yeah.
son?
He's an American fork. His name is Kim Hendrickson. His phone number 756.
You want to know? Well,
6939.
yeah, maybe make a little tear off for me and
What?
to take.
6939.
That's fabulous. I always like to add more to my site too. I'll tell you, any information I get, I push it onto there.
What's his name again?
Kim.
He builds the caskets.
I know.
801-756-6939.
6939.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
My husband
How
has
much
always
does he
said that
charge?
he wants to buy.
You've been talking about cremation.
And he, because he is
The law for that, or are there different prices down at different
what is this?
places? I don't know.
Yes, the prices vary tremendously from one funeral home to another, so all cremations are not the same. Some will give you a bill for like a couple thousand. Really, a reasonable price cremation is about $900 right now, $950. Well, now that the legislature increased the cost of the permit by another $100, so I think we're getting close to $1,000 now.
So, is the cremation different for animals than it is for people?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
Because the reason I ask, if
5666939.
me went to the Precious Pets in PG, they would have to have a permit, wouldn't they, to handle a body?
I don't know. It's just funny to think of.
Because I think the cost might be lower. It costs us $300.
Let's call Precious Pets and sign them up.
Okay.
I think we do have to have a permit, which is why the cost went up, is because their permit went up, right?
Yeah, that's right. The medical examiner's office needed to be funded, and they thought, how about the dead people? They're not going to complain. So, yes.
When you are keeping the body cold, I thought I heard something about plastic wrap. So if you use ice packs and things, is it generally a good idea to put some kind of wrap around the body? Is that what I heard you mention?
I haven't seen people need to line the you could line the casket with plastic and then put your quilt in it.
I was wondering what the method was. Do you try to keep some kind of insulator around the ice packs around the body? Is that how
this one friend in Provo, she said she could see ice crystals on the outside of the casket. She said, I think we were going overboard. And nothing bad occurred. You know, it was a 2-day open.
Do you have all of this in your UtahFunerals.org website?
Yes,
All the
there's
information?
links to YouTube videos on how to care for your dead. And really short ones too. 3 minutes on dressing the body, 3 minutes on carrying a body, And there's also other websites all across the country. More and more of this information is becoming thorough and available.
So, are you personally gonna go with this family taking care of you?
My family?
No, you, when you pass,
Yeah,
your family is gonna take care of you.
yes,
Okay, how did
or
you?
else. What am I gonna do?
Roll over in your grave, right?
I'll roll
Lay
over my-
It's a real delicate situation here, because if you ask somebody to take care of you, after, that takes a lot of tenacity for that person. So how do you sell that to them and your family?
I've raised my kids this way. They have the tenacity. I raised them to not want a $1,000 wedding dress and to want a home funeral. So I don't know. What more can I do?
The planning form that we fill out.
Oh yes, I can put it in writing. I have
has
put it in
all the
writing.
detail you want.
Yeah.
And that's what they need.
I don't know. Hopefully they'll be so broken up about my passing that they'll want to do this just because they love me so much. First, and then we'll come over.
About 4 years ago, it was my husband and my 50th anniversary, and so all of our children got together because we planned a big family get together, and at that time, they said, Mom and Dad, we want to sit down with you. And we got them together in our home, and they said, we're going to plan your funeral with you now. And so we went through all of these different things about how we wanted it to be done. Now I've got a lot of ideas I can add to it, but it was a really good thing because we were able to express our wishes, and they were able to, decide who was going to do what and how it would all be handled. So it's a really good thing for families to do ahead of time.
I love that example that your family came over without a funeral director needing to be involved in this planning session. That's great. Yes.
I think one of the hardest things to help family understand is that it's not disrespectful. Like at first to see the pine box sticking out of the back of a Subaru, that's not, it almost I think most people feel like that's disrespectful, or to have you be in the back of a truck, or things, or that, you know, a lot of the caskets, you know, they're very beautiful, and to help them understand that it's not disrespectful, that it is just a simple pie.
It's disrespectful of the amount of money these people charge, that's.
Yes,
what it is.
exactly. But that's,
And before-
people are afraid
before
that
you
they
ask
are being disrespectful by not giving a disrespect to your life.
Yeah, and if people don't wanna go that far, on our website, we have the comparison price, and all they have to do is price shop at a glance. If that's all they do, they're gonna save gobs of money, so.
I was kind of uncomfortable coming to this meeting because of where I come from. You know, I mean, I was raised Catholics where death is horrible, and I was raised in Venezuela where they don't get to the point that they pay people to cry, but they cry for 48 hours. And the more they cry, the more they feel like they love the person, and that kind of a thing is very morose. But listening to this presentation, I was commenting to Eileen that having the whole family involved in doing it, and dressing and the casket and carrying and taking, and it brings kind of a finality and also a closeness and unity in the family. They have an opportunity to express the love by doing that. For the person who died. So I am glad that they came.
Thank you. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
When my father passed away, we were in Iowa.
Can I give you the
Car
mic?
to read it to buy back there, so his brother bought pickup. We put my father's casket in the pickup, drove all the way from Iowa to Arizona. Each one of our children got to ride in this pickup. And it was a remembrance that if you talk to them now, they can tell you what they're talking about.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And
Precious
it wasn't
memory.
disrespectful. I think they thought it was far better, the whole family.
Excellent, thank you. Yes.
Well, it was that way with my husband's mother. We dressed her, one of the granddaughters did her hair, did a beautiful job on her hair. It was very personal. His sister and I did her makeup, and she looked just beautiful, and we didn't spend a ton of money doing that. And it was not at all morbid, it was just very special. And everybody who wanted to watch and come and see her was able to do that, and so.
Great.
It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, good testimonial.
Joyce,
Yes.
do you have a lot of these stories that you shared on your website?
I actually don't. I have some stories on the website, but not all of these. So good thing you came tonight.
Do you have the link to your favorite mortuary around here that
They've since retired, and so I'm back to trusting no one. But there are some fair-priced funeral homes, and treat them just like you would any business. You know, maybe they're doing the right thing today, maybe not next week. You know. But we rank all of them by price. So on the survey, cheapest to most expensive. And I'll tell you one secret. The cheapest are always the most flexible. Yeah, go figure.
And they may not be the closest to you.
Oh yeah, that was my number one tip on my website homepage. Don't go to the one closest to your house or the place of the services, because that'll just trick you into not being aware and being. I forgot to mention this. The two things you need to continue to be is retain your knowledge and your ability to walk away. If they start saying things you don't like, but they've got the body already, you gotta be. You say, I don't want to hire your services anymore. Give me my body back, or something like that. You can say something.
I'm going to share something. My brother-in-law passed away over a year ago in California, and he and his wife were Seventh-day Adventists, and they did it in a very different way, but we liked the idea. They buried him first. The family got to see his body before the burial. We went over to the gravesite, and everyone that wanted to could speak and talk about their feelings about him, things they remembered, and so forth. It was really personal, mostly family right there. And then we left and they buried him. Then we went to eat someplace at a restaurant. And then the next night, we had this happen on Friday morning, the burial. And then Saturday evening, they had a huge memorial service. He was a Seventh-day Adventist doctor, so he had many, many friends, professionally and personally. And they had a lovely, lovely memorial service in a huge chapel. And it was very nice because they didn't bring the body in and do all of that. He was already buried, but the services were really sweet. And for the whole family, it was a lot less stressful. And it could be done here too if you wanted to. You don't have to have the body there during the services because you want to remember the person and love them and talk about those things. So I just thought I would share that with
I
you.
love that you mentioned that because why not have a little personal family graveside service and then go have when there's no body present, the funeral is called a memorial service, and then hang out with people as long as they want to stay. And yeah, it hadn't occurred to me before, but somebody mentioned that to me recently that they did that as well. And I thought, hey, that's a really good format. That would have saved us some juggling. Anyone else? Yes. This only goes so far, so yes, come on up.
My two little nieces that passed away, one was 3 and one was 5, they did this type of service. They kept their little body at home, and they made a pine box for them, but then they got to decorate the pine box, so they painted it white, and then all of the kids and the cousins and everybody, all the kids got to put their hand in whatever color paint they wanted, and then they put their handprint on the pine box so that it was decorated with all of everybody's handprints, and then you could write a little note by your handprint. And that was the first little niece, and her favorite was Alice in Wonderland, so they buried her in an Alice in Wonderland dress and decorated the coffin with sayings from Alice in Wonderland. And then the next niece that passed away, they were sisters. The next one, her favorite was Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. So they put "There's No Place Like Home" all around the casket, and everybody again got to put their handprints. And it was really special to be able to do it the way they wanted, and that they could keep their little daughters in their rooms. The second one, her doctor actually kept her body because she wanted to do some tests or something, and so she said she would take care of her. And but I didn't know that this was what this was going to be about tonight, but I thought it was really special the way they did that she said, I don't want my daughters embalmed, and I'm going to take care of them, and it was neat because all of her siblings got to help, with everything.
Yeah, wow, that's got to be healing for children, for them to interact like that. Well, if there's no more questions, we should have cookies. Yes.
Do you have on your website how to keep the body cold?
I thought you were going to say, do I have more funeral consumer advocacy songs? Yes, I do. Yeah, more on the website, how to keep the body cold. Yeah, on that DIY page. It's called DIY Funerals.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, aren't you glad you came?
Yes.
I do know of a very inexpensive funeral service where you can just pick what you want and they'll do exactly what you ask them if you want to ask. Okay? I'll say a closing prayer and then we want to invite you to have a cookie. They're just back on the table. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity to be here this evening to listen to Joyce Mitchell and all her interesting information and to learn and to be better prepared for one of life's profound experiences that we must all partake of at some point in our lives. We're thankful that we can meet together as sisters and discuss these things and have questions and answers. We're thankful for the Relief Society and all that it provides for us, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So help yourselves. No, so they were wonderful.
Oh, good.
They did exactly.
Of course, you knew what you wanted.
Yes,
Yeah, that
and
helped.
they did exactly what we wanted and nothing else.
Perfect.
And they're the ones that rented the gurney.
How long ago was that again?